Welcome everyone to another episode of Data Futurology. In Data Futurology, we aim to have conversations with leaders and executives in the data analytics, AI, machine learning space and discuss the challenges that they're facing in order to increase the adoption of AI in their organization, in order to create a more data-driven culture within the organizations and get bigger impact from these technologies. And we do this to share their insights and their journeys with the audience and show the art of the possible. So generally, people are struggling with very similar situations, and having different points of view and stories from different people helps us get ideas on how to move forward. And so before we jump into today, I'll got to make a couple of announcements. I might start by thanking the sponsors that we have behind me. So Yellowfin is a lead partner for this series, which is focused on retail. So it's this series is all about data and AI in retail. Yellowfin is our lead partner. It's an Australian brand for the people who don't know. They create products to make analytics simple, which is great. Our gold partner here is Informatica. They've pioneered the Informatica Intelligent Data Management Cloud. It's fantastic. So that's Informatica. And last is Talent Insights, which is our recruitment partner and longtime sponsors of Data Futurology. We're really thankful to all our sponsors. Thank you very much. So today is all about creating a data-driven organization, a data-driven culture in your organization, and how you set up capability in this space from the start, from scratch, in what I think is a really great way. For that, we have Christelle Young, who is the Chief Strategy and Analytics Officer at L'Oreal ANZ, to talk to us through her journey. Christelle, how are you doing this morning?
Thank you. I'm great. Also in lockdown here in Melbourne. I feel like I can see a lot of other people who are in lockdown either in Sydney or Melbourne, but thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
It's fantastic. I'm very excited to have you on the show, and very excited for us to share your journey. And yeah, it's fantastic. So please start by telling us a little bit about your role and your remit in L'Oreal.
Sure. So I look after, as you mentioned, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at L'Oreal, Australia and New Zealand. So I look after the Australian and New Zealand business unit. Now, just to, scale up and set the scene, L'Oreal is the number one beauty company in the world. So if you think about, from a organization size-wise, it's got 35 brands throughout the world. It's a $28 billion euro company in 2020 alone. So it's quite a big company, 85,000 employees in over 150 companies around the world. So it's quite a big company. And then you just got Australia and New Zealand, which is my remit. So what it's doing on a wider scale in terms of research and development and AI is really quite sophisticated. But when we go down into essentially we're a distribution, and when we talk about AI and analytics, we're really talking about how to make better decisions from our day-to-day business. So my remit is really looking around how can I use data and analytics to really help us make the better decision at the end of the day. I came from a background, to set back my background, I came from a background in management consulting prior to this, but I've also been on the tools doing analytics prior to that. So come from a world of IT faculty and creating tools and tools with analytics embedded into it to help organizations through operations. Is really my background. So yeah, that's a little bit about the remit. Do you want me to talk about the journey in more detail though? Can I get straight in?
I'm very excited to share your journey. So tell us a little bit, how long have you been at L'Oreal so far, and what was the journey look like?
So I actually started at L'Oreal officially in February this year. So I haven't been there long. It's only been just over 6 months. Wow. But I came there at the end of last year to assess really where they are in terms of their analytics maturity and their journey. So Rodrigo, the CEO of L'Oreal ANZ, had we had set up a conversation and he said, look, we have all this data. We're just not utilizing it to its full potential. Can you help us come in? And we don't really know where to start this analytics journey. We've got some dashboards. We think we're pretty good at some of the basics of what we're doing, but we know there's more potential, but we just don't know how to harness it just yet. So I came in and had a look at where are we today, and we used that Analytics Impact Index framework that Carney and Melbourne Business School developed back in 2018, which assesses the maturity of an organisation from strategy and leadership to culture and governance to talent and skills and data ecosystem, and understood where is L'Oreal from a maturity perspective. There's 4 different stages of maturity in that Analytics Impact Index, and L'Oreal Australia was really at the very beginning of the journey. They weren't quite mature. They certainly, probably the area they lacked most was the culture, the governance, the operating model. They didn't have a data scientist in the organisation to the skills. They didn't have anyone with that statistical background or knowledge too in there. So we said, okay, this is where we are. These are all the gaps that we need to fill to get us to over here. And these are all the projects too that actually add value. So instead of just doing analytics for the sake of analytics, what are our core business strategic problems that we're trying to solve, and where does analytics play a role, and how much value do we think analytics brings to each of those different projects too? For example, pricing. How can we use analytics to help us do pricing better? And does that add value at the end of the day? Another example, HR recruitment as another example. We can do analytics there, but it'll take this long, and how much value is that going to add? So we went down through everything, through all the different functions, and listed where analytics plays a role and how much value, to then be able to create a roadmap. So 2 roadmaps, one from a maturity perspective, and what are all the things we need to do to improve our maturity, and then what are all the things we're going to do from project-wise to add value. So they go hand in hand. One thing that we were very big on starting with is not so much the data ecosystem. There's work to be done there to centralise the data, to clean it, to fix it. But it was really about adding value first and getting the culture moving along. So we set off, there's a few things we did in this space. One was around, we branded this. So it's called AVA at L'Oreal. AVA stands for Adding Value Through Analytics. And we've got the AVA community, we've got the AVA Hub, we've got the AVA Academy too. So AVA Academy, let me talk you through some of the AVA things that we've got. AVA community it's a Teams platform with anyone can opt in. We also have monthly meetups where we just talk about analytics. It's a support network and community. If anyone's got a problem in Power BI, they just sit in the chat in the Teams. Does anyone know how to do this DAX query, or can anyone help me with this? Anyone got an idea? Or just sharing, I found this education or podcast or, any kind of interesting things in the industry or relevant in that topic, just for people in the organisation to support and help each other and talk about it. And people that don't know anything about analytics to just hear what's going on too. So we had a lot of people opt into that. And then the second thing is this AVA Academy. So the aim there was that every single person in our organisation would touch some form of training within the next year around analytics. So we have 3 pillars of training. One is pillar A, training for everyone, every single person. So they're things like, what is analytics? What is AI? What is machine learning? Just demystifying it a little bit. What's a use case? What does it look like? How do we even think about this? Where do we start? You'd be surprised. A lot of people just didn't even know what machine learning was or AI. Like, what does that even look like? Is it a machine you bring in? Is it, it's just these lines of code on a notepad even. Like, it's actually not that fancy, and we kind of go, oh yeah, but this is what it is. So it's just demystifying it and getting people related to it. And then there's Stream B, which is around the tools and technology in our organisation. So upskilling people on basics like Excel and Power BI, and we've got some other L'Oreal tools and how to utilize them a lot better too. And then the third stream is for the analytics community. So a little bit more into machine learning and some more technical statistical things, the Google Cloud Platform, upskilling in a little bit more sophisticated areas. But it's quite funny. I say it's just for the analytics community. The amount of people that wanting to do those trainings, even though they haven't just done the fundamentals of statistics or something, but they just want to, I want to learn. The eagerness for it has been quite overwhelming. The other thing we did from Word Go back last year around education and training, which I think has been key, is that our whole executive leadership team, from the CEO, Rodrigo, to the whole executive leadership team, did a Data for Decision Makers course with Melbourne Business School. So it's only a few days course, and the entire executives understand how to put their business problem into an analytics problem, or how the two worlds collide. How do I think about my problem? How do I think about all the things that drive that problem? And then actually that becomes a data frame, and that becomes a decision too. Or we can have proxies for certain things that drive it. So just understanding how to merge those two worlds made them be able to talk to an analytics person a lot better and translate those two worlds. Then we have all of their, what we call our senior leadership team, the -1, also do that course at Melbourne Business School too. So every key decision maker within the organisation that was making really quite impactful decisions around our P&L or anything of major importance had gone through that course. And it's been light bulb moments for them in terms of, okay, I get it. I get how to merge these two worlds now. So that was one part, the culture side of things. And then, of course, we brought in some talent too. So that's something I think we did a little bit different to most other organisations. L'Oreal isn't, they didn't have the translators in the beginning of this journey. So even if I brought a data scientist in, it's like giving you a fancy car and you don't know how to drive it. So it's no use us just going out and hiring data scientists when no one knows how to utilize them. And you can't be on top of everyone at the same time. So what we did was a few different things. We didn't create a centre of excellence. So I actually don't have a direct team as such. Remove this, I think, my light. So what we did was we created more like instead of a centre of excellence, everyone within the organisation from an analytics point of view is a dotted line to me, but they're embedded in the divisions in the business. Nice. They're really accountable and responsible for the KPIs of that internal function or wherever they sit too. So that was one thing that we did, which I think has been really important in them being accountable and being part of that business. The second part is the archetype we brought in. When you think about data science and analytics, kind of 3 archetypes. There's this translator, the person that can speak business and analytics and bring the worlds together. There's the core data scientist that sits there and crunches model. And there's this data engineer too. So, I mean, ultimately we want these unicorns that can be all 3, but not all the time we can do that. So we've purposely tried to bring in a team that kind of encapsulates all 3, but really leans heavily on these translators. So they had to be really good communicators. They had to have business savviness. I can't just get a core data scientist in that can't speak business until we've got these translators set up. Phase 2 of our journey, that's when we can start thinking about the next phase a little bit differently and the people that we need within the organisation now that they're able to work better with data scientists and analytics community too. So that's a few parts. I'll pause at that.
It's amazing. Oh yeah, and that is amazing. I think you've done things from my opinion. Like I think that you've done things so well. You've been really courageous with your decisions and have gone against the trend when necessary. And so I'm really keen to explore those. I think that something really interesting that you did at the beginning was around setting the strategy, bringing in the framework that you mentioned, and sometimes what I've seen a lot is that when people go to set a strategy for data or data analytics capability, they focus on on the tactics. So they say, sometimes people say, oh, we're going to go to cloud and that's our strategy. Or they say we're going to use these tools and that's a strategy. But the strategy, in my view, it's really painting a picture of where you are at the moment. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go as an organization? And then the steps to get there, or what are the high level steps to get there? And then the tactics come in to enable those steps. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you did that part of the process? Tell us a little bit more about the framework that you used, and how it was received in the organization.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So actually, you touched on a really good question at the very end, how it was perceived in the organization. And partly the reason I'm also here, and a really important point, actually, because it doesn't matter what framework I used or what strategy or what roadmap, the key to the success that we've had at L'Oreal is a really open-minded entrepreneurial mindset within the culture. That was already there. And that has just been key to enabling everything too. So I just wanted to pick up on that point first, because without that, and without it from the very top too in driving this, there's no way L'Oreal would be at the speed and the momentum and the flex and the openness to this change and transformation too. But yeah, let me talk about the framework a little bit more. So it was all based on the Analytics Impact Index. So when I worked at Carney Management Consulting, I co-created that with Melbourne Business School and a number of professors within throughout the world too were part of this project. So what it was we created a framework. We went out to 400 organisations throughout the world, so including some of the big names and big tech companies. All the Australian banks were in there. There was a number of major corporations globally within this survey. And what we actually did was then the plethora of questions and data that we collected from all these companies to say, if we actually do analytics on your data to understand analytics, how can we separate the factor of analytics to see how much that drives value within an organization? And in all the different parts of your organization, how important is all of that in driving analytics? So we did analytics to assess analytics in that framework. So what we were able to do is isolate the fact of, if you're in this region, if you're this type of company, if you're in this sector, if you're this big, isolating for all these other factors, what's the drive, what's the value in analytics? A few things that came out of that very clearly was that culture and leadership were the two biggest drivers of driving value when it comes to analytics. The other big finding we found out of all of that is that most companies first start off in tech and the data ecosystem.
Yes.
And without the interaction variable, and I'm getting a bit techy here, without the interaction of strategy and leadership and culture, if they're not interacting, it actually has a negative effect on adding value with analytics. Does that make sense? So it needs to be in combination. If not, if it's in isolation, it actually had a negative effect. I hope that makes sense. So it was really this findings and this framework that really set the path for me to understand and go, okay, I know exactly where I want to go with this, and I know exactly how we want to head. Where is L'Oreal? We know where we want to start exactly. It was quite analytical in some way of doing this framework. I know where we are today. I know the steps from each of those. There's 16 key constituents in the 4 pillars. I know exactly what I want to do in each of one of those steps. And I know how to measure it again too, because I'm going to use the same framework. So I've got where I want to go. We want to be leader. Of course, we want to be a leader in analytics. We want to be the number one. So there's some clear steps that we need to do to get there across those frameworks. And I can measure it. I can measure it quarterly. And I'm really excited to say we have moved along. We have become better in certain areas too. There's still certain areas that we need to work on. And in fact, it's around the data ecosystem, because we've spent so much time moving those top drivers, which is great. We're on the right path. We're adding value. We're getting models in. But now we've got to work on this data eco side of things. So that's why that Analytics Impact Index work was just pivotal in terms of understanding what our roadmap's going to be. But the other part to that that I will elaborate a little bit more on is, what are all the projects? People often come from other organisations, say, where do I start? Like, what do I do? And it's not an easy question, because what's your problem that you're trying to solve? It's normally what I ask them. Or how do you make money as a company too? What are the key things that drive revenue in your company? Some people it's property. It's, some people it's, some companies it's around just volume and sales and market share, or every company has a different lever that's really core to driving value within their company. So there's no perfect model for every company. But so there's that factor, understanding the value, like I said earlier. But the other factor that I didn't really talk about a lot in the beginning was, how hard is it to do today? Do I have the people to do that project? So let's just talk pricing for a moment, because pricing is always a big one on people's list. And it can add a lot of value in an organisation if we do some analytics around the pricing. But I need to ask you, in your company, do you have the people to do it? Do you have the tools and the technologies to do it? Do you have the process set up to do it? And even if you had all those things and you had the perfect model, are you able to implement it? Do you have the team to implement the findings? Is that doable? Are you able to measure the effects of it? Are you able to keep that within your current process, or do you have to change the whole entire process? So we needed to go through all the different projects and assess how hard is it to actually do, not just do, but also implement and embed it into the current work. So we're not looking at just the analytics process, we're looking at the entire process first and foremost. And that's what I ask the team to do anytime they do analytics. Let's look at the entire process, because even if we have the ultimate solution, we might not be able to use it properly because it doesn't work with, let's take media buying as an example. L'Oreal buys a lot of media, TV ads, etc. I might give you the perfect model to say how much exactly to spend in each channel. But if that's not the way we buy media, or if that doesn't make sense in the process, it's a useless model too. So there's so many other factors to assess. And we call that ease of implementation, how easy at the end of the day is it to implement. So I did more maths to understand the roadmap of what's the value score and what's the ease of implementation score. And then we could create a roadmap off the back of that for the projects too.
Well,
lots of analytics for the sake of analytics.
Oh, that's decision making driven by data. So the whole way through, it's fantastic. So you encourage people to the analytics people to think about the end-to-end business process to identify the key sort of points or levers of value, and for them to focus on the ones that are easy to implement or within the realms of what's available today. And I think that's another key decision that you've made. And I really like how in every decision there's a trade-off, and the trade-offs that you're making them with open eyes. So it seems like the way that you're going about things, you know exactly what the trade-off is, and you're deliberately deciding to go for the things that you are going for. One of those is to focus on value first and having the perfect data platform later. and that's something that I personally really liked about the way that you've implemented your strategy. Could you tell us a little bit more about how I guess what difference that has been able to make compared to the other option, and how that's helped the culture move along in the organization as well?
Yeah, it's the data science community will probably hate me for putting the data ecosystem last, because it's painful for them. It makes it painful for them, because essentially what it means is they're getting data from all over the place. They're cleaning data like crazy, and a project takes you this much time. They're doing cleaning and collecting for this much of it, and then just a little bit of modelling here, and then the implementation and so forth. But so it's not ideal in that respect. But let me take you back to when I first came to L'Oreal. One of the IT people had said to me, ANZ is nowhere near ready for analytics because they don't have a data lake or platform yet. You can't do analytics yet. But I said they've got Excel.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't have big data in Australia. We don't have millions of people apply for a job like in China. We don't have billions of transactions. We don't have terabytes and terabytes. When I download last year's data in a division, I'm not talking terabytes. I'm actually even talking Excel files. Like, it's not big data. So I can do a lot with just Excel if I have to. I mean, the team aren't using, just Excel, obviously. We're still using R and Python and some other tools. But at the end of the day, I don't need a fancy Hadoop cluster and lake and stuff. I don't have that amount of data to start with, so I can just start with the basics. It is painful in some respects, though. So I'm not ignoring how important it is, and it is still really important, and it still needs to be worked on. And it's not as if we didn't start with it completely. So there was little bits that we did along the way, but it wasn't the main focus, and it wasn't going, I need this much money to invest in to start this whole analytics journey. In fact, can I mention too, we have not invested anything in analytics except the learning and development budget got swayed to focus on this, but we didn't put anything extra into this year's budget. So it was as is. So
that's
what
amazing.
we did, we didn't invest. We haven't invested anything in the data ecosystem. Not to say that it will need to come though, but we showed value first. So even the heads that we brought in, they were actually just current roles that left. And what happened was, I'll give you an example. In one of the division, there was a commercial analyst role that came up. And when I first started, I said, you've got a commercial analyst role. Why don't you make it a commercial data analyst role? Yeah. Because this is their job description, and it was reporting and doing these things. But they could do all of this too if you make it a commercial data analyst. So they got a commercial analytics analyst in that role instead. Boom, off and running in a different direction. And that's what we did within the division. So there was no new headcounts or investment actually added into this whole entire journey. That too is really important to note. And
that's amazing.
Lost track. I was talking about data ecosystem. The other thing
and the decision on focus on value first and kind of like how that helped the culture or the adoption side.
So, if you start with data ecosystem, you pour all this money into enhancing it, and people, people then turn around and go, we've spent so much money, but what value have we actually got? At least we can turn around and say, hey, we haven't spent a cent, but look at all this value we've added with these models. It's been painful to create some of those models from the team, and they've had to push and push to show. And I'm cognizant that there's false kind of promises sometimes to go, well, you don't need a data ecosystem. Look what the team are doing without it. So I'm cognizant of reminding that it is very important. I don't want them to think it's doable without it either. But at the end of the day, it's really important to show this is the value. These are the models. It could be even better and quicker from an implementation point of view if we have this data ecosystem set up. So I'm always cognizant of showing that. But that has just been so important from a cultural point of view. I cannot emphasize when people touch and feel it and it's in their area, they're like, wow, they have no idea what good looks like until you show it to you. And when I first came in, they said they wanted to see use cases. Okay, I'll show use cases. So-and-so did this, so-and-so did this. This is a use case, this is a use case. But then the next session, I remember them saying, can you show more use cases? I was thinking, I've shown so many use cases now. Like, what can they show? What is it? But what they're really asking is, I don't get it yet, because how does it? What am I supposed to do? How does it affect me? So, and I do remember one of the senior executives saying, Christelle, I didn't, she was yelling data to her teams, and she was all on board, and she admitted, but I had no idea what it was about until one day you challenged me in a meeting and had said, what does the data say? And it was like a light bulb moment of how it affects her. And she was like, oh, now I get it. It was that, now I get it. Now it relates to me. Now I understand the value of analytics, and now I get where it's part of my journey. So until people can touch and feel it, they don't comprehend and understand it. And I think that's more important. The culture, like I said, is so much more important than the data ecosystem side of things. It also takes a lot of resources and a lot of time to set up your data ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's hard work. I'm sure many people can relate. Cleaning data is hard work. But, people will ask me too, Christelle, we're getting people in to clean our data. Where do we start? Well, what's the problem you're solving for? Do you need all of those columns in your data set cleaned even? If you have a CRM system, do I need everyone's, PO box address correct in it when I never use? We don't use that data. We don't use the data. Maybe the postcode might be important, but we need the email address. That's important. But let's have a think about what we're actually trying to solve. What are we doing with the data first? So that's why I also think starting with your data ecosystem, what are you building anyway when you don't know the problems you're trying to solve for too?
Yeah, and I really like that approach that you've taken of focusing on the problem first, and both for the business people and for the analytics people, that they both essentially get the same message of start with the problem. What is the problem? Let's focus on the problem and work from there. I also think another sort of key insight that you're sharing with us is about making analytics personally relevant for the individuals, and seeing through the questions of more use cases, or showing us use cases and then more use cases, and kind of like taking a step back and be like, it's not personal for them yet. They don't get it in their area. Let's go into that. I think that is awesome. That is awesome. So I do have a few more questions. We also got questions from the audience. The last question that I'll ask for a bit, and then we go into audience question, is about the hub and spoke model, and essentially embedding the analytics people in the business units. I think that's a fantastic way to do it, and I think it's quite courageous to do it from the start. Could you tell us a bit about how about the decision, how why you chose to go that way, how it's going, and the impact on the culture that it's creating?
Yeah, okay. A few things of why I chose that. I thought when we had a look at the organisation org structure and what we think it looks like, to be honest, there was 3 phases I thought the org structure would look like. It's not as if this is going to be the same org structure in 5 years' time too. And it really depends on where you are in your journey too. So assessing where they are, obviously having a look at all the gaps, what a good org structure needs to be in the beginning of their journey, etc. When I recall going back to both the Analytics Impact Index, we also assessed org structure in that piece of body of work, but even just within consulting and going to many different organisations, what I often saw, or even just from friends within the community, is when, not all the time, but sometimes when you have a centre of excellence, what tends to happen is there's someone doing the model, they're so attached from the business. And one thing that really irritates me is when they say, but the business, they feel so separated from the business. And but the business don't understand us. And they feel like they're this group that are more powerful and intelligent. And they talk about the business like the business.
Yes.
You are the business. Like, we're one team here. So I didn't want that cultural mindset or attitude happening either. It's we're together. It's not business and us and we're these super beings or something. You are the business. So I wanted to make sure that we start our journey as one too. None of this business and us. Secondly, what I often found was that They would do analytics or a model, they'd give it to the business, and then who's accountable and responsible for that model? Who's measuring it? Who's actually accountable that it's doing the job it needs to do? And normally a model, if you think about a model, it ties into some sort of KPI, improving revenue, reducing cost, or it might be up, or something along that lines, increasing the number of conversions, whatever it might be, which aligns with increasing revenue. So there's some sort of KPI it aligns with. When you're in an analytics center of excellence, you don't really feel responsible or accountable for those KPIs either. Your bonus structure, your actual KPIs sometimes can be slightly different from the division that you're working with as KPIs. So I wanted them to be accountable and responsible for these models and the KPIs. I wanted them to be part of the business, part of the problem. The way I see analytics is just a tool on your tool belt. I don't see it as something in isolation. So we're here solving problems. It's just another way to solve the problem. It doesn't mean sometimes it's the solution too. I didn't want people coming to the team and going, I need you to run this machine learning model. I wanted the team to go, what are the problems in this business and how can analytics help? And sometimes the team aren't working on analytics too. They're helping improve a process regardless of the analytics. It's not the means to the end. It's not sometimes the answer too. It's just purely analytics. So that's why I wanted to make sure that they're completely embedded. And then not only that, because this is a new journey, because I'm a new archetype from an culture point of view, there's no use me having this team and this we're all in this little silo together too. They need to be out there, even from a cultural point of view. They need to be sitting with the business. They need to be next to the business to just as much to embed this way of thinking and working, and just even having them and their screen next to different divisions, and people walk past their screen and go, what on earth is on their screen? What are all those lines and numbers and code being written? Just, those things, it needs to be out there, not in this little room together in a hub too. So there was multiple different reasons why. I'm not saying it's perfect. There's times that it's quite, it's sometimes it's nice. It would be nice to have the Centre of Excellence and have full control personally and selfishly. I would love to have that control sometimes. Sometimes it's harder having them into the divisions, but it might be harder sometimes, but for the long-term benefit, I think it's going to be much better long-term for the divisions, because they're finding it, how do I work? How do I do this? And their struggles sometimes is going to be better for them long-term. So a little bit of pain, sometimes short-term pain for long-term gain too. So yeah, that's a little bit why.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. So we're getting lots of questions, lots of comments. Overall, people are really impressed. So people are saying, Nima says, systematic and pragmatic approach in data analytics leadership. Thanks for sharing. Conrad says, pretty amazing that you were able to manage with your existing resources and everything you've done. Taz says, it's always start with the problem and work it out from there. Great points. Loving the insights. Rachel says, very key to have actually analysts from the beginning and providing value and then building the ecosystem. Great. Jason says, analytics is definitely the tool, not the solution. Yes. Awesome. Conrad says, I like the way analytics culture has got a lot of attention. This is fantastic. Okay, so let's do the poll quickly. So we've had about 87% of people answer the poll. So I'll close the poll now and we will go through the answers. So share the results so everyone can see. Very good. And then, so question one, and then I'll ask you for your thoughts, Christelle. We'll go one at a time. So question one, does having been on the tools make you a better analytics manager? We're talking about this. So 80% of people say yes. 20% of people said no. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm super curious to see what people think of this too, and it's really interesting to see 80% of people say yes. I'm in the yes camp too. I mean, I've been on the tools, get the pain of cleaning data, and I've also been managed by people who have been on the tools, and I've been managed by people who haven't been on the tools too, and it's really painful sometimes. I personally think from experience working as a data scientist to someone that hasn't been on the tools, they don't get data cleaning is a good example. Because some people just don't get the importance of it. But just, you've got the data, just get me the number.
Correct.
It doesn't happen like that. You can't just get the number. And it's really hard and frustrating sometimes when the manager just does not relate. And I feel much more connection to my team, to the community when you get it and you can actually talk about upcoming algorithms and you can share papers and research and, hey, have a look at this graph theory methodology that someone used on pricing, and this is really cool, and you can have those conversations and be at the same level. I think that's really impactful and important. It's kind of like the cultural thing, to be part of the community and the culture. So I'm in the yes camp. I'm curious to know the people in the no camp, though, and why.
Yeah, if anyone can share on the chat why you think it's better if the manager hasn't been on the tools, that'd be very interesting to share some thoughts there. And with your comment, even though what I really like is that even though you're in the yes camp for this question, you're still helping the team focus on business value above or before the developer experience. And I think that's great. And coming from, being, if they see you as one of them, then I think that message has a lot more strength. So that's fantastic. Great. Question 2 is, what is the most important place to start the analytics journey for an organization? Most people said that strategy. So about 50% of people said strategy is the first place to start. And then next most voted was leadership, and then data, and I'm like reading them in order, then talent, and finally tech. So that is really great. What do you think about that?
That's interesting. This is one where I think it kind of goes hand in hand with leadership too, though. I think it's very important. That's what I've been saying the whole time. But strategy and leadership are kind of interlinked too in this journey. You really need the executive sponsorship too. You need the people up the top to believe it. It has been key at L'Oreal ANZ that Rodrigo has been a major ambassador. Every single town hall we have had, it's been data, data, data. He's been in some of these meetings. One of the very first models that we implemented, one of the things that came up was, but Christelle, we've been doing this forever and we've been winning at this, and we haven't been using analytics or data. We've been trusting our guts and we've been going, all right, now we've been giving a model and it's telling us to do something different. Why should we trust the model?
Yeah.
In that first kind of use case that came up where we had this model, it was so important to have Rodrigo really backing it and saying, guys, let's try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Let's experiment. Let's measure. I'm taking the risk with you too on this journey. I will help mitigate that risk. Let's just try it. So without that, it would have been such a battle to kind of get this across. So you know what? We implemented it and, hey, we measured it and it worked, and we're in, that particular KPI of return on investment was improving off the back of that model's decisions. But leadership was so important in this whole beginning of the journey. I think we could have done the analytics journey without the strategy and had leadership, would have been still okay. But still would have been effective. But if we didn't, having leadership and no strategy would still been okay. If we had no leadership but a strategy, I don't think we would have gotten as far. So I do think that's just a little bit more important, but it goes hand in hand.
I love it. Yeah. And lots of comments agreeing with you on that one. So Rachel says strategy and leadership cannot be separated. Ryan says +1 for leadership and strategy going hand in hand. So yeah, definitely agree. That's great. Thank you very much.
But then talent, I'm surprised people said data over talent, because I mean, this was one, like, we need people to do it. We need someone to start and do the actual model too. So, I mean, we also need data. I guess that's just important, but the right talent can pull it together and clean it and sort it out a little bit. Or you need to collect it. Oh, yeah, now we're getting a little bit philosophical. Chicken or the egg.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that sounds good. So next question 3 was, do you think your organization is bringing execs on the data analytics journey? And 70% of people said yes, which is fantastic. 30% of people said no. What do you think about that, Christelle?
Yeah, I feel it's really hard for the people that said no, because it's so important if you don't have that. I mean, it depends where you are on your journey too. If you're already quite mature at this, I'm assuming there's an element of it's churning along. Maybe the people that said no, the execs are not. It's already just embedded within the organisation. But that, I guess, is somewhat fine. I don't think many companies, if any, are in that position in Australia. Not many at all. So I really highly doubt that's those no's that are in that camp. So I feel like they would have a bit of a struggle. But having said that, I have been at organisations where the execs have not been on the data analytics journey up the top. It doesn't mean that you can't start within your little function or your pillar, wherever it is. You can't start being an ambassador for it.
Yeah.
And if you show value in your little area and your little function and you do the same side kind of things, then you can bubble up and show those use cases and show that power too, and then start bringing everyone on the journey too. So it doesn't mean give up today.
Exactly. Yeah. And showing the value is the way through. Leading with the results, and execs are attracted to value. So wherever value is being created in the organization, they'll come and see, hey, what's going on here? How are you guys doing this? Yeah, that sounds great. And question 4, so the last question in the poll was, is your organization creating a data-driven culture throughout the organization? 67% of people said yes, and the rest said no. What do you think about this, Christelle? This is something you focus on.
I think you've heard my thoughts on this one. It's just, I couldn't emphasize more how important it is. For those that are in the no camp, once again, I think going back to what I just said just then, you can still create it within your little bubble, your little silo, your function, and start scaling that and show the momentum and the excitement. I think it's just as important to show how exciting it is, and you can grow that. I think a good example of this is our zone, as an example, are not on the same journey as ANZ is. But we've started it. We're doing it in our little bubble in ANZ, and we're growing momentum, excitement. Now, we've just recently showed Zone what we're doing, and guess what? Now they're all like, oh, we're really excited too. What are you doing? How do you do it? Can you teach us? Can you, and now that we're doing, it's the same thing. So now that bubble is growing and the excitement is growing to the other different countries, and they're wanting to start this journey and get analytics people in, and they're asking us how we did it. Just so it's the same kind of concept too.
Excellent.
Doable.
Excellent. Okay, I'll stop sharing the poll now. Thanks everyone who answered the poll. And a lot of comments while we were talking through the poll. So Jason says exec buy-in is so important. Andy says, agree, leadership will make sure that the strategy is executed if there's buy-in. Michael Brand, hey mates, says, loving the chat. So refreshing to hear this clear-eyed, practical point of view. And a few people agreeing with Michael's comment. So that is excellent. We'll go through some of the audience questions. I was trying to get a lot of them answered through our conversation. So one of them was, there's a question from Taz around the data translators. And his question is, should they be getting more focus or more airtime in the discussions that we have within the industry, in how we build teams, whether they're getting essentially, enough attention from the industry, or are we mostly focused on the technical and the algorithms part? What do you think?
Yeah, I think without a translator, it's like you've got these two streams running in their own direction. You need this kind of interlink. So important, that interlink, that translator. Are they getting it? It's really interesting. Are they getting enough airtime? I've actually seen jobs come up now for an analytics translator, not an analytics analyst or a data scientist, just actual translator is the job title, which is interesting that that's more and more prevalent and people are recognizing it. So I think it is starting to get more airtime and understanding. But I do agree with you. I think people too often, you need to get talent in, you go search for a data scientist as opposed to a translator, but there's a slight nuance between them too. And sometimes a data scientist can be a translator. It's really assessing their business mindset and savviness. You can make a data scientist a translator if you stick them in the business and put them in the shop or put them at the bank counter or put them front and center and get them part of the business and upskill them in that respect, and they can start becoming a translator too. It doesn't mean it's you just go out and you hire a translator. I mean, ideally you want it to be a data scientist that has got that business savviness and mindset, so you can upskill too, just like we're upskilling people in analytics. Sorry, there is a part of that journey where all analytics people have to be upskilled in business side of things so that they can become that translator. So I do agree, yes, they should be given more airtime in terms of the importance of it, but I don't think it's like an either or. It's just training a data scientist to be it or training the business person to understand analytics, either. Yeah, that's really good. Definitely there's exponential returns by having the knowledge from both sides in the one brain, and the more brains we can have like that, then the more it grows. So I think, the way you're doing it is fantastic. We have a question about the roadmap. And essentially, the question is, you talked about different phases of your journey linked to a roadmap. How long does your roadmap extend out? Can you tell us a little bit more about the roadmap and essentially how it evolves over time? Okay. So it was done for 2 years, but there is checkpoints at the 6-month mark. So, for example, right now we're heading into phase 2.0. We're calling it. It doesn't mean your roadmap will always stay the same. Business changes, environments change, things happen, COVID happens. You have to pivot. You have to change. There's a part that I think is good to have an end goal and a clear understanding, and whether it's 2, 3, 5 years, that's great. But there are 6-month checkpoints where we reset, and some of it will change and pivot a little bit. Some of it will become more important now or become less important, either. So, it does. It was initially a 2 years. We just redid 6 month in Ava 2.0. What does that look like? It is pretty much on the same path. There are some nuance and changes into the projects that we're focusing on. Also because there was some plans around getting certain people in that we haven't been able to in one of the divisions. So that roadmap was changed a little, some slight nuances there. But generally, it's a hard one. It's dependent on your organisation too, on how mature and how much you need to do. It just so happened I had 51 initiatives around maturity and 31 different projects. So it just so happened if we timed all of that, that's the time period that it fits over. You might have 2 initiatives in your organisation. So I can't answer that for everyone. But I think the way that you're doing it is really well, where you're having a strategy, a vision that helps create the roadmap, and then adapting as things change, and that can be from
internal or external to the organization, things are going to change. So revisiting that, going into new phases is definitely the way to do it. So thank you. Okay, looking at the clock, last question. I can't believe it's been an hour. This has been great. So heaps of comments saying people how they've really enjoyed hearing from you this morning. So last question, just because there's a few on the same theme, is around helping people develop analytical skills and versus managing their workloads. Do you have any views to share between how to juggle the two, and between people doing their work and learning new things in the job?
And once again, this is where leadership's so important. It's so important that they allow people the space to learn, allow the deadlines to be cut, allow them the space, allow them the day off to actually sit down and learn. Our senior executive team, like I said, went on that Melbourne Business School journey. There was one of the groups had to be online. We had them in different groups. One of them actually went into the university during one stage where we were free there for a little bit. It's so important that they were all allowed those times and those periods to be free, no disturbance, not on their phones, not on their computers, shut down and actually focus and learn. So I think this ties in with leadership. They need to allow people the proper time for learning and development. I think learning and development is key, not just from your own organisation level, but from an Australian level too. If you think about, our immigration, we're not going to be able to get the same kind of skills coming in anymore. We have to upskill locally. We have to empower our people. And with this whole fourth industrial revolution, if we don't get on top of it now, Australia as a whole economy is going to be left behind to some degree too. So I just think that learning and development is key. Leadership is key to enabling that too.
Love it. That is fantastic. And that is an excellent note to end on. Christelle, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. So many nice comments coming in now. People are saying thank you so much for your time. It has been very insightful. And thanks, Christelle. Awesome session, and needs a part 2, I reckon. That's nice. That was excellent. So real, relatable. The world needs more leaders like Christelle. That's great. Thanks for the session. Yeah.
What part 2 needs to be is on sustainability. So one thing we didn't discuss is there's modelling for 2 reasons. One's for business, about the cost or revenue, most companies. One is for sustainability. That's a really cool topic. That's
yes. Done. All right. We'll definitely take you up on that. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your insights, your journey. It's been amazing. Thanks to everyone who joined this morning. And after the webinar, we've got a quick feedback survey. So if you can take a couple moments to answer that, that would be great. Come back next week, same time, to continue the Data and AI in Retail series. Next week, we're going to be discussing personalization in retail. So thank you so much, everyone who joined. Christelle, thanks again. That was awesome.
Thanks. You're welcome.
Everyone.
Well, bye.
Bye.